Hello, today I'm going to be walking you through our finite state machine. We developed this for programmers, and it's a really lean and simple state machine without any fancy bells and whistles. It's meant to be something you can use and get up and running quickly. So I've already created a new project here and I've imported the asset. You'll notice when you import the asset, two new folders will appear under your assets folder. There'll be standard assets, which contain some files needed to run the demos, and the state machine folder, which contains all the folders you'll need to use the state machine. The first thing I'm going to show you is how to access the state machine console. It's very easy. All you need to do is click Window, Tools, and FSM Window. That will bring up the empty console for you to use. What I like to do is drag the tab over here into my scene section so I can switch back and forth easily. Okay, in our console is where we'll build our finite state machine for your game. So the first thing you want to do is create an empty game object. So game objects, create empty. And then here you can name it anything that you think makes sense for your game. We'll just call this my object for now. Oops, didn't save it. Okay, and now we want to go ahead and associate that within the console of your finite state machine. So under this target area, you just want to drag your empty game object here, and that'll go ahead and associate it for you. Now that you have your object associated with the finite state machine, you can start building the components of your game. I'm going to go ahead and maximize this so we have a little more room. So to get started, you just double click to create a new state. And with any game flow, you want to maybe spend some time thinking about how you want your game to flow and which states are needed in your particular application. This can be used in any application really, not just in games. But for the sake of our example, we'll talk about a game. So in games, usually we have a number of pretty standard states. So when the game loads up, we'd have an initialization, and then we would have a menu, and then we'd have a state of playing the game. Usually there's going to be a pause, game paused. What else might we have? Game over. And we would also potentially have a settings state. And so really, oops, I didn't mean to add that. So that's a good point. If you accidentally double click and add another state you don't want, you can remove a state by clicking the minus sign next to the upper right hand corner of that state. Just remove it. So now we have the basic building blocks of the states of a game. You have the initialize, load up, goes into your menu, goes into a playing state. Depending on what happens in the playing state, if they hit the pause button, it can go into pause mode. Then we can go back to playing when they exit pause. And then based on any number of conditions, it can go into game over. So now let's go ahead and create the basic connections for these different states. So from initialize, we know we're going to go to the menu. So in order to create these connections, you click on the box on the lower left-hand side and drag that connection to whatever state you want it connected to. And it will turn yellow, as you just saw, when it's ready to make a connection. So here we've connected this initializing to menu. And from here, in the menu, you can go ahead and choose to start playing the game. So we have connection here. Or you can choose the settings button, let's say, and go to settings. So you're in the settings state, you've done whatever you need to do, and then from there you can go ahead and move out of settings, and it would take you back into menu, let's say. Okay, and you can drag these however you like to make it clear for you, more easily readable. So to continue with our connections, while in playing, let's say you hit a pause button, it would go into the pause state. And once you're done pausing, you'd hit a button and it would go back into your playing mode. I'm going to drag this over here. Let's put pause down at the bottom. So when you're playing, you can go into game over, but you can do that in a number of ways. So you can go playing to game over, and what would take you there? You won the game, let's say. So this event, you can name the action that occurred to take you into the next state. So let's say you winning the game, that takes you into game over. So you would type that 1 here, and that lets you know, it gives you a little more information about what occurs to take you into that state. Just like if you double-clicked accidentally, you don't want to have this connection, you want to remove it totally, you click the minus sign, we'll reconnect here, and it remembers what you just did. So 1. You can also go into game over if you die, let's say. So we need to change that name. And to get out of those, you just click in the gray area. And then you can also go into game over if you quit the game. Okay. So once the game is over, what's going to happen? Well, in this game, it's going to revert back to the menu, and you would start all over. So here you can see the states, the basic flow of your game. The game would initialize, it would go into your menu. Depending on what the player chooses, you would go into your settings state, do whatever you need to do there, go back in a menu. They chose playing, you'd go into your playing state, you'd have your program there. When it exits playing, it can either go into game over or it can go into pause. So other things you can do here is you can add some more information that would be inserted into your code. So anything you put here is going to be comments. This state happens when game is opened, let's say. And so when you finally get to the end of this process and you're ready to create your controller, that would be in the comments field. So what we want to do here, since we have the basic structure of our game, is we want to go ahead and save our finite state machine for this game. You can name it something that makes sense for you for this state machine. So my first finite state machine. We'll just call it that for simplicity's sake. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And once you save that, let me go ahead and minimize this. It creates a text file in your resources folder. My first finite state machine. You can see here, this is like the blueprint of your game. So anytime you make changes to this, you'd want to resave it and it would add or delete from this. One interesting feature is if you accidentally, let's say, delete that, oh, you didn't mean to, you don't want to recreate it, you can just click load as long as this resource file name is correct. It's still associated with that one. Load it, and it will go back to your last saved event. So at this point, no actual script has been created. We just set up our initial flow. In order to actually create the initial script in the controller, what you would do is name your controller name, whatever makes most sense in terms of your game or application. In this case, I'm just going to call it my first controller. And you click Build Controller. But before you do that, a few things I want to note. Really, you would only want to build this controller once. So you'd want to have a pretty good idea of how your game is going to flow, which states you're going to have, which connections you're going to have before you go ahead and build this controller. So let me go ahead and maximize this again. Let's say I'm pretty comfortable with this. This is going to be all my states. It's going to be a very simple game. So I'm going to build my controller here. So you simply press Build Controller, and we'll minimize this. And that's going to create a script under State Machine Controllers. You can see here my first controller. And this is going to be the initial script that is created with this. Now, you have to note that if you make changes here and click Build Controller again, it's going to overwrite this controller with the very basic set of scripting. So if you were to, within your controller, let's say add any kind of programming logic, and then for whatever reason you went back in here and click Build Controller again, it's going to erase all that and just build you the initial structure again. So good practice here is once you build your first controller, move it out of your controllers folder and put it into another folder. You can create another folder and just house them. That way you don't lose any work on accident by clicking Build Controller again when you don't mean to. So once you have that controller built, I'll go back to MonoDevelop. Take a look a little bit at what it does. So each of those states you created, this automatically creates those fields that listen. So the program is listening, are we in that state, are we exiting that state? And that gives you the basic structure you can build upon to build your game, so you don't have to worry about all that logic yourself. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is adding actions and conditions to events. So the nice thing about the state machine is it lets you add actions and conditions and attributes without actually having to write any code. When you build this controller, it'll create all that script for you. So in this example, I've gone ahead and added up a level up state. So in your game, your character might meet some condition that would allow him to level up and go from level 1 to level 2. So the first thing I'm going to do here is add an attribute. So for example, level equals 1. So to add actions and conditions and actions to your event, you just want to click on the event itself. Actually, I'm sorry, I clicked on the wrong event. Let me reconnect this. And I already started doing this. So I named this event level up. And so in this, between the brackets are going to be your conditions. What has to happen for it to go into this state? You can have as many conditions as you want. You just need to separate them with a colon. So for example, you might do state equals Florida, and that would move you into this state. So for example, an example of a game, you might be coins equals 100. When your character gets 100 coins, it's time for them to level up. And then you don't have to give it an action, but in this case you would want to give it an action. So after the backslash here, you can say level equals level plus 1. So when you build the script, it will automatically have the code in there to listen for this particular scenario. So when the player has 100 coins, the level will be increased to level 2. It's as simple as that. You can add other conditions later on if you find that you want to put something else in the script. You can just open up the MonoDevelop controller script and add any coding you want yourself. So I really appreciate your time and thanks for listening. I hope you find some use with our state machine. Have a great day.